Thanks for joining us on today's webcast. We'll be talking today about BI and analytics governance with Qlik. First, just a quick introduction. My name is Alli Hogan. I am a business intelligence and analytics consultant here at Thorogood. Feel free to get in touch with me via my contact details on the screen if you wish to have a longer discussion about today's topic. So before we get into our agenda, I'd like to talk a little bit about our three objectives for today. During this webcast, we will first discuss some fundamental tenets of business intelligence governance. Second, we'll illustrate a governance journey and discuss how Qlik can fit into that. And then finally, we'll introduce our approach to establishing a governance strategy and give you some tips and tricks along the way. Our agenda today will start with an introduction to Thorogood. We'll then briefly introduce Qlik before we move into a deep dive on governance and establishing a governance strategy. For those of you unfamiliar with Thorogood, we are an independent professional services consulting firm specializing in business intelligence and analytics solutions. We've been delivering value in this space for over 25 years, and we operate as a single organization, serving our customers globally and often working in leveraged teams across our offices in New York, Philadelphia, London, Bangalore, and Singapore. All of our consultants are recruited and trained in the same way to develop a unique mix of business understanding, technical excellence, and analytical ability. We provide a full range of services to support your business goals, covering the end-to-end life cycle of any project, starting from the initial strategy and roadmap definitions to requirements gathering, design, implementation of complex solutions, through to training and support of the business users. We also provide ongoing data or analytics services, as well as planning and business modeling systems. Our clients typically span 4 data-rich verticals: consumer goods, pharmaceuticals and health services, banking, and insurance. Our clients are some of the leading organizations in these sectors, and we take a lot of pride in the long-standing relationships we have fostered with some of the names you see here. These organizations are large, complex businesses, and we rely on our thorough business understanding and deep technical expertise to deliver successful solutions to their business challenges. So in terms of the technologies we work with, we are an independent consulting firm, meaning we don't work with just one specific technology. We do, however, work and partner with many of the key players across the market in order to provide our clients with the best solution using all of the technology tools at our disposal. Since we'll be talking about Qlik today, one of my personal favorites, I'll give a bit of a background to our relationship with Qlik. We've been a Qlik partner for almost 10 years and have a wide experience with integrating Qlik with other BI tools like Microsoft and Salesforce. For those of you less familiar with the Qlik platform, it's really much more than just their flagship product, QlikView. In the last few years, they've expanded their platform to include cloud offerings like Qlik Sense, Qlik Analytics Platform, and Endprinting, all built on the same Qlik associative engine, so still providing that same associative nature that everyone knows and comes to expect when working with the Qlik tools. To dive into a bit more detail, we'll be focusing on the 3 main products in the Qlik platform. As I mentioned, QlikView is the proven software for rich guided analytics applications, with a large amount of properties for developers to tailor the application specifically to the user needs. This product's been around for a while, and it's been a lot of fun to work with. Qlik Sense is a relative newcomer and is the next generation self-service data visualization application. The drag-and-drop framework allows all users to create their own visualizations without necessarily doing a bunch of coding. And this still sits on top of the same associative Qlik data model that everyone knows and loves. This really puts more power in the hands of the end user. Finally, Endprinting rounds out the platform to provide structured, formatted office reports on top of either QlikView or Qlik Sense models. If you're interested in seeing any of these tools in more detail, please reach out to me and I can set up more of a detailed demo for your specific needs. Now that we've introduced Qlik, we'll get into the meat of today's presentation, starting with discussing our fundamental tenets of governance. In working with a number of different customers on their BI governance strategy, we've honed in on 4 critical considerations that underpin every successful BI strategy. We'll go through each of these considerations, which we've boiled down to the 2 Ps and the 2 Bs. First, your strategy must be practical, meaning strategy and standards should be rooted in actual use cases. This is a common pitfall of governance strategies where people will develop their strategy in a vacuum, never really considering the real-life application of their strategy. By ensuring the strategy and standards are rooted in practical application, the standards will be more easily adopted across the organization. Second, your strategy must be prioritized. There are many different topics that can be covered by a governance strategy. Therefore, it's vital that your strategy is prioritized so proper focus is given to the areas deemed most important for your organization at that time. Third, and our first B, your strategy must be balanced. This tenet works hand in hand with prioritized. It's important that the priorities are balanced to address all areas of need, including the people using the BI platform, the data sources collected in the system, the tools at your disposal, and the process that pulls everything together. Lastly, your strategy must be bespoke or unique to your business. This is perhaps the most important tenet and one that is often overlooked. Each organization is unique, so it's critical that people don't see governance as a one-size-fits-all approach. Today, I'll give some common themes that we see across organizations, but remember that your organization may require some adaptations and nuances. With these 4 tenets in mind, let's talk about 4 general focus areas of governance and some of the governance topics that fall into each of these areas. As I mentioned, there are 4 areas of governance activity that typically play into an overall strategy. Each of these areas will require different levels of focus depending on where you are in your governance journey. A bit more on that later. For now, let's step through each of the areas and highlight some of the key activities or topics we typically see in each category. First, we have standards definition. This is likely what most people will first associate with governance. There are a number of topics to consider in your standards, such as security, mobile, software development life cycles, and best practices. These standards can take many forms, but it's most important that these standards are prioritized, balanced, and practical so they can be easily applied to the real-life scenarios. While standard definition will likely take a front seat in establishing a governance strategy, the overall success of the strategy is just as much contingent on the strategy's ongoing execution. In this area, we focus on the execution of the standards. Key to this is the sharing of standards in a two-way feedback loop. While it's important to note here that the standards need to evolve as projects, people, tools, and processes change. We'll discuss more on this when we share our approach to establishing a governance strategy. Next, we have administration and support. Similar to ongoing execution, this focuses on how to enable users and admins to effectively execute and grow within your governance framework. Activities relevant to this area focus on training, coaching, and monitoring. Sometimes we'll work with customers on user empowerment programs, which specifically focus on growing users within your organization, focusing on best practices, data and tools training, and fostering an analytics community. Lastly, we have a forward-looking area of focus. As I mentioned with ongoing execution, your governance strategy will continue to evolve as the BI industry changes and evolves. It's important to give balanced focus to look ahead. Company initiatives change, tools change, product capabilities continue to adapt and increase. All of this will require anticipation and adaptation as your governance strategy continues to grow. So, how do we apply these fundamental tenets in practice? Let's jump in and follow a company that uses Qlik and learn a little bit about their governance journey. Like any journey, let's start in the beginning, where it's important to have a solid foundation designed for future growth and scalability. For Qlik, we recommend a 3-tiered approach to your architecture, with separate layers for the extract, transform, and application layer. In this example, I've highlighted a sales and target architecture. Here, we have our enterprise database with our sales data and our sales target potentially from an Excel file. These data sources are crucial to the business, and we want to make sure that everyone is looking at the same information in the end reporting layer. In Qlik, we have a common extract layer. These sources are extracted with QVWs and created into incremental QVD files, essentially a QlikView data file. This streamlines the extraction process and means you really only need one extract for each source. The transformation layer combines the sales and target information to extrapolate target information, maybe for all territories or all products. with a closer alignment to the sales data. This is where the crux of the business logic sits, and this is really the fun part. Because we've set up this tiered architecture, we use this code and logic for multiple front-end applications. In this specific example, we've built a local market application in Qlik and a global KPI dashboard in QlikView. Because we've only defined the transformation in one location, we can rest assured that our local sales reps and our global executives are all looking at the same sales and target information, and we can leverage both QlikView or Qlik with this data. After we've set up our architecture to define the common business logic and allow it to be scalable to integrate additional sources and add more users to the platform, we also need to set up a framework for developers and users to ensure that best practices are used throughout these applications. With our experience across a number of Qlik customers, we've learned some best practices, what works really well, and what can lead to some headaches in the future. We'd hope to share these ideas in structured documents covering a few main areas. First, we sometimes start with development principles, and these can cover a number of things around architecture, ETL, user interface, section access, that sort of stuff, and potentially provide tips and tricks such as restricting the usage of VBA or requiring justification for the use of extension objects. These specific recommendations will be dependent upon your organization and your Qlik environment, but just to give you a sense of some of the stuff that we've recommended in the future. As I mentioned, these standards can also cover the ETL approach similar to what we discussed earlier. Outside of the development standards, we've also helped to define naming conventions for all Qlik files, such as extract QVDs and extract QVWs, to help make the system a bit easier to understand and a bit more streamlined. And then finally, we've helped to define user interface best practices, including things like screen size and ensuring that the corporate colors are used throughout the entire applications. An important consideration during the definition of best practices is to consider user adoption. There are some relatively simple best practices that can be used to enhance user experience and drive user adoption. Of course, you don't want to implement a tool just for the tool's sake. You want to make sure that the users are excited to use the tool and that the tool is very intuitive and user-friendly. For example, having consistent layout across applications with filter and search boxes in the same location makes it easier for users to view various applications and makes it a bit more streamlined. In addition, embedding a how-to page can help answer some basic questions about how to use the Qlik functionality. This tab can live right directly within the application. Sometimes we'll even add an information button on the specific dashboard tabs to show and hide key definitions or calculations to help answer some of the user's questions and allow them to trust the data. In addition, Qlik Server, Access Point, and the use of section access can help promote user adoption in a secure, governed environment where coworkers can collaborate together on similar business applications and the right people can see the right data. Another key consideration for user adoption is to ensure you've selected the proper tool based on the user needs and tool functionality. As I mentioned with Qlik, there are kind of three main products that are important to consider when you're looking at which tool to use across the suite. While I don't have time to get into the details of what to consider for tool selection, I've shown our approach here on the slide. And we start with the BI spectrum of reporting and analytics needs. For users to be truly engaged with any BI tool, the functionality must be appropriate for the desired needs and use case. We find that many of our customers can struggle with this question, especially when considering the various aspects of the Qlik product suite. We approach this challenge by categorizing the business needs into one or multiple of the categories at the top, and then reviewing the tools to see which pieces of functionality are most important. The reality is that this is a spectrum, and there is not a one-tool-fits-all approach. The value of the Qlik suite is that it can cover all use cases and provide a seamless, flexible platform to help a user, maybe starting from the guided experience of a QlikView report into self-service exploration in Qlik and then potentially a structured report in Printing for distributing those analytics. Once you've embarked on your governance journey and people have started to use the environments, it's important to ensure that developers are adhering to the standards and users are adopting the tools you spent time and effort developing. The Qlik View Governance Dashboard is an application provided by the Qlik company that taps into your server data to extract loads of information to monitor governance. Instead of just showing you a screenshot here, I'll jump in and show a demo of the anonymized version of the app that I have on my local machine. So here I've pulled up Qlik View, and you can see that this dashboard gives me an insight into some of the server, publisher, and usage statistics. On the server side, it will give me any warnings in terms of over the last 28 days and shows me any RAM errors. In the middle here, I can see the publisher statistics. I can see the amount of time that these applications are taking to reload and see any that are taking longer than usual. And so, for example, these two applications are taking much longer than planned. I should probably take a look and see what's changed for those specific tasks. In the user section, I can see the number of active and inactive users within the last 28 days and within the last 3 months as well. And I can see which applications they're using and how many sessions that they've had. I can drill into details within the operations and applications. For example, if I click on this Publisher tab, I can see all of my detailed tasks I have running on Publisher, and I can see which ones have most recently failed. This gives me a high-level overview of anything that I need to jump in and look at in a bit more detail. In addition, the middle section here shows me the server load and when jobs are reloading within the hours of every day. This can help me load balance and make sure that I don't have a large number of tasks reloading during core business hours, which might impact the performance for my end users. As we know, if people are complaining about the performance of a tool, it will decrease the user adoption, so we want to make sure that we do our data reloads on off hours if possible. If I jump into the application side here, I can click on this complexity, and this will give me a list of all of my applications I have on my Qlik server. This calculation here just aggregates the number of different tables, rows of data that I have, the sheets, objects, and just gives me a sense of which ones are the most involved. I can change the thresholds here, but here I can just see that these two applications are pretty complex, and I want to make sure that I have proper support and proper resources dedicated to supporting those. Within the Objects tab, I can see all of my different objects that I have. I can also look into the details of the expressions to make sure that people are calculating a similar measure the same way, using the same formula across different applications. And I can also see the fields that are used in terms of the expressions, variables, and dimensions. Finally, the lineage section here shows me all of my sources and all of the processes that run against those sources, as well as any exported files and all of the connection strings that I have on all of my applications. I can also see the QVD files and the fields that are generated with that. So this can be particularly useful when you're trying to create a new application and you want to see if an existing application already uses your data source. This will help streamline development, make sure you're reusing the same connection strings, and avoid duplicating effort on that side. Now that we've discussed the key pillars of governance and walked through how Qlik can help you on this journey, I wanted to talk a bit more about our approach to governance in general. As I mentioned, developing a governance strategy for your organization is truly a journey. We have worked with our customers to develop customized governance strategies to meet the unique needs of their organization. While each strategy is specific to an organization, the process in which it is developed can be applied across businesses. The first step is to create a list of governance items that are important to you and your organization. If you think back to the fundamental tenets I shared a few slides ago, there were a variety of topics you could look to address as part of your governance strategy. This list is just a baseline, and we would expect it to be inclusive of many of the topics we have identified, including self-service, mobile, and monitoring. If you're using Qlik, you may also consider some of the features that this tool offers to aid in aspects of a governance strategy, like I showed in our example. Once we have collected a list of potential items, we'll look to bring together the right people to discuss the key objectives of the governance strategy and what it is they want to accomplish. It's important to include relevant sponsors from both IT and the business to ensure that the technical possibilities align to the business goals. With the main objectives in mind, we then work with our clients to prioritize the list based on what's important to the key sponsors, and what tools, technologies are relevant to their organization. Prioritizing this list helps ensure that the most critical items are addressed first, but that we don't forego the holistic nature of the strategy. After prioritizing the governance items, we'll look to identify a few representative use cases to use as the basis for testing the strategy. By doing this, we ensure that the standards designed are rooted in practical application and developed alongside real business users. With a prioritized list of governance topics, as well as your practical use cases, we are now ready to create our initial standards and strategy definitions. Depending on the list and use cases, this initial definitions could be fairly quick. As those definitions come together, of course taking input from the key players as well as our practical use cases, we'll look to test out our initial strategy and standards definitions by applying them to the candidate use cases. This should really be done in close conjunction with the setting of standards and strategy, even though we've listed them as subsequent steps. And of course, this testing will likely need you to iterate on those standards and feedback into the definition as well as the use cases. Once there is an initial or 1.0 version of the strategy the organization is happy with, the strategy can be released more widely and the rollout with coaching and training can begin. Here, it's critical to consider getting the right people involved to ensure the governance strategy is properly adopted. We find that's also important and helpful to set up some sort of forum that users can provide feedback on the governance standards so that the strategy can continue to be iterated upon. This creates a feedback loop that allows end-user feedback to be integrated into the overall strategy. Looking at the approach in a bit more detail, we can see that it aligns to the 4 governance pillars that I shared in the previous slides. If you approach a governance strategy from the beginning, it's clear that the standards definition initially takes up a large portion of time compared to the other focus areas. But as your governance strategy matures, the time spent on each of these will flex and change based on the activities you approach as an organization. In this sense, these focus areas are constantly evolving based on where you are in your governance journey. Something else to note about the approach is that the analysis on tools and technologies happens pretty early on. It's key to understand the technologies at your disposal and how they can help you in your approach to governance. As I highlighted earlier, Qlik has some great functionality to help with a variety of these topics. So now, you may be wondering, well, how do I get started on this journey? Just like the bespoke nature of a governance strategy, we don't expect everyone to be in the same place with their current strategy. To help you consider how you might get started, we've listed a couple common questions or difficulties we've seen our customers struggling with and noted some possible ways to overcome these obstacles. As an example, you may be struggling to identify the right areas of focus for your governance strategy. In this case, you may be seemingly pretty early on in your journey, so starting at the beginning of our approach may work best. Therefore, we'd suggest bringing together the key players in a visioning session that helps you identify and prioritize the key areas of focus. Another example, you might be looking to set up more of a self-service environment, but not all users are properly skilled or have the right tools at their disposal. In this example, a user empowerment program can include coaching and training and really driving that user adoption to grow that self-service environment and community that you're looking for. Alternatively, looking at the third bubble, you may have a governance strategy in place, but some use cases or projects don't fit. In this case, it's possible that some of your standards are either not rooted in practical application or just that they're merely out of date. Consider revisiting the standards and starting by organizing feedback and prioritizing the key governance areas. Wherever you are on your journey, it's never too late to pick up the approach we've discussed today to start or enhance your governance strategy. So I hope today's webcast has shown you how you might look to set up a governance framework within your organization, as well as some of the key areas of focus within this strategy. I've also put my contact information here on the screen, so reach out to me directly if you're interested in more detail. Thanks, and have a great day.